Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gene Kroom. I have the pleasure of serving as president of Judson University. We are thrilled that you are here today for Conversations with Mark Vargas featuring Mark Cuban. So thank you for joining us. The World Leaders Forum was started in 2011. And since that time, we have now 3 series, this being our newest, Conversations with Mark Vargas. We also have the World Leaders Forum Inspiration Series and, of course, the World Leaders Forum. We've raised over $600,000 for scholarships and entrepreneurship activities, and we're working to champion a new effort to help recruit foster youth to college. But we can't do it without your support. So thank you to our sponsors, thank you for attending today, and thank you for being a part of the program. So please give yourself and all of the other folks in attendance a big round of applause. And also on Tuesday, October 8th, will be our next program. We're very excited to partner with Herrick, who has a unique program called Socrates in the City, where he talks about issues of global importance with some very special, interesting guests. And that program will be in Schaumburg at the Renaissance Hotel, and it will be featuring Caroline Kennedy. So we hope that you can join us for that program as well. But today, we are in Elgin. And we're at Judson University, and that's by design because we enjoy bringing fascinating people to our hometown. And so we're appreciative that the city of Elgin is a partner with us in this program, and Carol Rauschenberger, city council person, is with us today. So please give Carol, on behalf of her colleagues and the folks of the city, a big round of applause for helping support today's program. It's my pleasure today to introduce Mark Vargas. I met Mark 7 years ago when I became president of Judson, and he told me these wonderful, fantastical stories of all the work he's involved in, the people he's connected to, and the things that he has done. And after the conversation, I turned to one of my colleagues and I said, "Who is Mark Vargas?" And as we got to know Mark and got to work with Mark and talked about his background and his experience, which ranges from working with political leaders and business leaders, being an entrepreneur himself, being a political opinion writer, being published on Fox News and the Daily Herald, the Chicago Tribune, and in the Sun Times. He's traveled with the Vice President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense. He has served his country as a contract supporter and working with the Department of Defense and helping rebuild war-torn areas, and with that entrepreneurial spirit. And Mark talked about these connections that he had, and we kept saying, well, Mark, how can we partner with you to bring these amazing people to Judson? And in the process, what we talked about was, well, if we bring them, how do we want to fit it into the World Leaders Forum, and what should we call it? And it became very clear and apparent after watching Mark on television and hearing being interviewed on podcasts and everything else, it's really pretty simple. It needs to be Conversations with Mark Vargas. And Mark, you just need to invite some of the friends that you have that you're connected with and just talk to them about the things that are on your mind. And we're honored and thrilled today to have a fantastic alumnus as a host of his own program as a part of the World Leaders Forum. Please welcome Mark Vargas for Conversations with Mark Vargas.
Well, thank you very much. As I said at the reception, there's 2 people that I really want to thank, and that one is Julie Schmidt. Julie Schmidt has put this together. She was sending me messages at midnight, 5 o'clock in the morning, and on Saturdays. So Julie, thank you very, very much for putting this together as the director of the World Leaders Forum. And secondly, Dr. Kroom, thank you very much for putting this idea together, and now it's a reality. So thank you very much. Well, you know him as a shark on ABC Shark Tank, billionaire entrepreneur, and owner of the Dallas Mavericks. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Cuban. Sit right here. What do you think? This is pretty cool, right?
Pretty nice. Bright lights, big city.
Bright lights, big city. Well, welcome
there are people here.
There's nobody here.
I know, it's the best way to do it. When they shine bright lights right in your eyes, it means nobody's here.
That's right. Nobody knows this, but we actually met on Twitter about 2 years ago. And so right now I'm wondering, do you regret responding to my tweet?
Every minute of every day. That's exactly what I was thinking when I was sitting in traffic in the rain driving from Chicago.
So for the last couple of years, Mark, you've really been working on a special project in healthcare. It was called the 10 Plan. And you've even said in some interviews that, this could potentially be your legacy. And I think you've been able to make a lot of progress on both sides of the aisle with folks in the administration. And so you're having really productive conversations and meetings. Share with everyone about this passion and about this healthcare plan that you've been working on.
Effectively, a couple years ago, I was like, okay, what do I want to do? You hit 50, you hit 60, and it's just like, you start thinking about your legacy. And I was like, well, I don't want to build buildings. It may help you in politics, but that's just not my style. And and so I think, okay, I'm an entrepreneur, and as an entrepreneur, you try to solve problems. And I'm like, okay, what's the big problem? Healthcare. And so I started thinking it through, and I was like, okay, I'll take a look at it, thinking whatever I come up with, someone's going to shoot it down in 10 minutes, but at least I thought it through. And so the first thing I did was, what do my companies use for insurance? And as it turns out, we self-insure. I'm like, okay, well, we self-insure. We don't buy actual insurance from insurance companies. Who else does the same thing? And if you look, I looked around, and it turns out with 95% of companies with 5,000 or more employees self-insure. I'm like, well, if the smartest companies, or at least the biggest companies in the country self-insure, why is our healthcare plan built around insurance? Because the reality is, one of the greatest lies we've ever been told is that the number of people insured is a metric for wellness. Insurance is a financial transaction. It's a financial instrument. It helps pay bills, but it doesn't really make you any healthier. So I started just going through the process and saying, okay, let me put together a basic model. What if we took insurance out of the loop? Just pretend insurance is illegal. We're not trying to make insurance illegal. It's a financial transaction. Buy it if you want. And so I said, let's just do something on a means-tested basis so that you pay what you can afford to pay for your health care. And I said, let's limit it. If you have Medicaid or Medicare or employer-based insurance, we don't want to mess with that. Let's just focus on what the ACA covers and what Obamacare covers. And so that's about 47 million people. So I said, okay, let's look at means testing. And it's not like the government doesn't guarantee loans for other things. They'll guarantee you loans for a house in some cases. They'll guarantee you loans for mobile homes in some cases. They'll guarantee loans for small businesses. They'll guarantee loans for student loans, obviously, to the tune of more than $1 trillion. But if you're sick and you don't have enough money, even if you have insurance, you don't have enough money for your deductible, you have to put it on your credit card at 19%, borrow from family, if they can afford it. Go get on GoFundMe, which is the biggest category in GoFundMe, which is crazy, or die, or stay sick. And I'm like, that's not right. So I said, okay, let me put together some parameters for a healthcare model that says, all right, if you are ACA eligible, instead of buying insurance, the government will loan you the money for your healthcare. But when you're sick, you don't have to pay any premiums, don't have to pay into it. And so I modeled this program, and I sent it to a really far-left economist, and I said, tell me if I'm an idiot, and would this, is this going to be more expensive and less expensive? And honestly, I expected it to be more expensive, but as it turns out, the insurance companies introduced so much cost and overhead that the savings were incredible. To the government, it would save $40 billion per year, and to consumers, it would save $45 billion a year. And I'm like, wait, something's got to be wrong here. Why? Well, the reality is, as part of the ACA right now, the way it's structured, because there's insurance companies, because they silo data, because they make things complicated generally, the cost of healthcare isn't the cost of healthcare. There's extra administrative costs and all that. So long story short, so I'm like, okay, we've got something here. So I started, connected with Mark. Mark introduced me to some really smart people and introduced me to different politicians, and I started presenting it to them. And I got a lot of great feedback. I talked to right-oriented think tanks, left-oriented think tanks, people who started the ACA, people who love the ACA, people who hate the ACA, and we've modified it into something called the 10 Plan, which, as I said, the bottom line is if you make $30,000 or less, You never pay more than a $25 copay. If you make more than $30,000, you'll pay anywhere from 5% to 10% of your income, but only when you need health care. And so it's made its way up the ladder, and now the 10 plan is being evaluated through something called a 1332 waiver for the state of Illinois, because I met with Senator Durbin, and he said, if you can show me that we'll save money versus the ACA, I'll take a deep look at it. And for the state of Arizona, because the governor there said, I love the idea, I want to be the first, but you've got to put together the model that shows it. So that's where we're at, and it's made its way to the White House, and they've given me feedback. So there's a small chance, but when you hear the Republicans talking about a new healthcare alternative or complement, because this also works under the ACA, then hopefully they're going to be talking about the 10 plan. So, not what you asked to hear, but they are.
It's a great proposal and a great plan. And you've just become an expert in healthcare about the costs and how many claims are
it's
denied.
Funny. So I read about basketball and watch basketball. I read and geek out with artificial intelligence and healthcare. I mean, I could tell you more little dumb factoids about, but it's important. And so, like anything else, there's a lot of entrepreneurs here. It's a forum for building businesses and growing economies. And like every entrepreneur, you test your hypothesis, you test your ideas. You go through this process where I have the idea. Then you want to know, is it legit, right? So you go on Google and you say, well, there's nothing like this, right? Now, we might lie to ourselves. It's just a little bit different. We use red, they use orange, whatever. But then you go to the next step and you get to a point where you say, all right, do I go forward with this? And, that's what I did. I approached this like an entrepreneur, and I just said, okay, let's just see what happens. And each step along the way, I took positive criticism, I took negative criticism. There's people, I talked to Zeke Emanuel. You guys, know his brother very well. And Zeke is the type, is just going to just crash the whole thing. But, he couldn't crash it. And so the point here for entrepreneurs and people who are building their businesses, getting negative feedback is just as important as getting positive feedback. Because one of the things that we as entrepreneurs do is we lie to ourselves. We tell ourselves we're bigger, badder, faster, cheaper, whatever, and then we kind of do our companies and ourselves a disservice by not really digging in and finding out the real problems. And so that's kind of been what I've tried to do. And I've told Mark, I don't want people who agree with me. I agree with me. I need people who don't agree with me so I can learn more and be smarter.
And that's on that final point, that's what was really impressive to me, is that you're a billionaire, you own all these companies, but you hustle. And with this healthcare plan, you've been hustling. You've been traveling around talking to everybody, and it's really impressive.
Well, I'm just a grinder. I always have been. My dad did upholstery on cars. My mom did odd jobs, and it wasn't like anybody staked me, and I didn't get a small $1 million loan from anybody. But I did get my dad to send me $20 every month at Indiana. So when it's not handed it to you and you can't lose everybody else's money, you got to grind.
Everyone's wondering the question. It's the 800-pound elephant in the room. But I'm going to tackle it from a different angle. When do you think you'll make a decision, whether yes or no? And more importantly, what would be some of your legislative priorities in a Mark Cuban administration?
I don't know who we're going to draft in the NBA draft on June 20th. My legislative priority is to win a playoff game finally again after 3 years. So I try to keep my priorities straight.
Good. I appreciate it. There's a good answer for you.
Well, I'll run one by you guys, okay? Because obviously I get asked a question or not. I'm not going to answer what I'm going to do, but after healthcare, here's one that I actually shared with a couple candidates on, obviously, the Democrat side. And so gun control to me is obviously a very important issue, but I think we've sometimes, even as entrepreneurs, you've got to take the opposite side and think about how, someone you may not agree with is approaching the problem, and is there something there that maybe can change the game, even if it's bizarre, obscene, and just not something that it seems natural, it's counterintuitive. And so I said, okay, Michael Bloomberg, as an example, spent tens of millions of dollars going from community to community and getting local gun laws to change. And I'm like, I just don't think we get there. So what I proposed to a Democratic candidate, and you may think is crazy, was to work to change the Second Amendment. Now that freaks everybody out immediately. But here's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say specifically, explicitly, every American citizen has the right to own a gun. Period, end of story. 2, the federal government may not confiscate anybody's guns. Period, end of story. 3, each state has the right to legislate as they see fit the purchase and ownership of guns and weapons. That's it. So everybody gets to own a gun. We don't have to argue about that anymore. But each state, Illinois has its own state, has its ways of approaching gun control. Texas has a different. Texas wants to be all open carry. But I have the right as a Texan to try to influence the legislative process. You as Illinoisans, is that the right, Illinoisans?
It's Illinoisans, you're right.
Right, that's a mouthful. have the right to say as you see fit, and sure, people down south are going to deal differently than people up north, but at the same time, that's your choice. So, to me, if we just leave it the way it is, then nothing's ever going to change. But if we change it so that, there's no longer, the NRA and other pro-gun groups no longer are saying, well, they're trying to take our guns away. Let's just answer that question. No one's trying to take the guns away. Now, it won't be easy to pass. Changing the Second Amendment is going to require, I think it's 2/3 of the Senate and 2/3 of the House and 3/4, I think, of states to change. But if it's important enough, that'd be something that I would put on the table. So you can take that. As I said, it's counterintuitive.
There's times sort of in our lifetime where there are moments that are sort of seared into our memory. For those that are around when President Kennedy was assassinated, you'll remember where you were that day. For mine, it was September 11th, 2001. I was a student here at Judson, and after the news broke, we all gathered right here in this chapel. And so that's why it means a lot. This is where I found my purpose, actually, that I wanted to serve my country in some way, shape, or form, that I wanted to go into politics. My question to you is, where were you on September 11th?
I was at home with my wife. We hadn't had any kids yet, and I usually have CNBC on, just paying attention to stock news, and they reported that a plane had flown into the World Trade Center, and I thought, oh, that just had to be a mistake. That pilot made a mistake, and then it just got worse from there, obviously, and you're kind of at a loss of what to do. You just you feel the pain, you feel just how horrific it is, and you worry about people and the people in New York and what's going on there, and you wonder what's next, and you feel kind of helpless, if anything, and it's a day that'll always be seared in my memory.
Switching gears a little bit more, you own close to 200 different companies. 80, I think, Shark Tank, a lot of companies.
Not own, invest.
Or invest.
Yeah.
You invest
Yeah.
in a lot of companies. You own the Mavericks. You're filming on Shark Tank. And you're also, more importantly, a husband and a father of 3 young kids.
Yep.
How do you sort of balance that work life?
Honestly, I waited. I didn't get married till I was 44, and so I knew, I was on a mission when I was starting. I didn't want to be poor anymore. I wanted to be able to control my own destiny. My dad, like I said, did upholstery on cars, and his, mantra to me was time is the most valuable asset you don't own. And to me, starting my own company meant A, I wasn't a very good employee, and B, it was the only way I was going to be able to control my own destiny and take control of my time. And so it just, I busted my ass. I went, my first company, real company, Micro Solutions, I went 7 years without a vacation. I had, dated people during the time, and it was like, when are we going to settle down? True story, I had one girlfriend who was like, it's me or your business. And I was like, what's your name? I mean, because if we dated a couple years, if you don't know me by now, I don't know who you are. But that was the sacrifice. And then after, I met my wife at the gym, and I was old enough, and You know, she had just turned 14 and no, that's a lie. I know that's a really sad lie. I take that back. I really. But no, and so at that point in time, and started dating, you know, and we dated 5 years, and it was like, okay, I'm ready for this. And now it's not bad. I mean, I travel more than I'd like to, just because I feel an obligation to help and try to do things like this. But I try to be there for as much as possible. I go to my kids' games, dance, you know, there a lot, you know, and I try to make, whereas before my trips were longer, now, you know, my trips leave in the morning, try to be back at night.
You know, I read before you joined Shark Tank that there was a clause that the contestants, about 5% of their company or 2% in royalties, and when they asked you to join, you had a serious conversation about that.
Well, it wasn't when I joined. So I came on Shark Tank as a guest in the second. Anybody watch Shark Tank? So appreciate it. Watch it more. I came on as a guest in the second season, and I bought a bunch of companies, because honestly, when I went on, I'm like, this is a business show. They'd been bouncing around different nights of the week, and I'm like, it's not going to last. So I bought too many companies, some really bad ones. And then one of the companies came to me and said, we're thinking of selling. I'm like, thank God. And but then they said, there's this clause, because I didn't read the contracts that the companies had signed. And they said, there's this clause where we have to give up 3%. And I went to ABC and said, that's ridiculous. I can't come back, because then they wanted me to come back as a full-time Sharp. I'm like, I can't do it if every investment I make trying to get exits or grow these companies potentially to sell them, or even not sell them because there was a revenue clause as well, they can never be really successful. That's going to be a boat anchor. So I can't come back. Thank you very much. And they were like, okay, no, never mind. We'll change it, fortunately. And that allowed us to get much better companies.
Well, thank you for doing that. You know, you weren't, sure. You know, you weren't always a billionaire, and you know, what advice do you have for people that are struggling, not just that are entrepreneurs, but people are just struggling with life, maybe they've lost the health. What advice do you have to those that are just really down and out?
Oh my goodness. You know, I mean, when I was living 6 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment, and excuse my French, but it was a shithole. You know, I didn't have a closet. I had a stack. I didn't have a bed, but that was the only way that I could afford a place when I went to Dallas. My car had a hole in the floorboard. And I just remember, you know, look, I knew that somehow, some way I was going to figure it out. I don't know how, you know, whether I'd be wealthy, or whether I'd just have a job or a company that just paid my bills. But I always just tried to find joy in the moment, you know, because we all feel stress. I felt stress. I remember I got fired from jobs. I mean, I got stuck. I was stuck. When I was living in that S-hole, what we used to do is we'd have, out of the 6 guys, we'd each write a check to one guy who would take it to the landlord and pay the check. One day, we did that, and the guy disappeared. The guy's name is Dave O'Brien.
Dave O'Brien.
And
That's right.
Dobie, where are you, Dobie? So, and you feel stress, obviously. And, you know, I just remember just thinking, look, I mean, I can put a lot of energy in what I can't do, or I can put a lot of energy into what I can do. I can focus on what I don't like, or I can focus on what I do like. If I can focus on doing things that give me a chance to get out of here and make my life better, or I can focus on other things. And it's not to say that's just a cure-all, but I'm a firm believer that you don't have to go out and hit grand slams. You know, I took a job as a bartender, you know, and really that's kind of glorified way of saying I knew how to bartend, but when I was just starting, I was more of a bar back, and then they moved me up because it was just a job. I had to pay my bills. And so, you know, when you're stuck in that job and you realize it's not your future, what are you going to do? You know, The good news now, as opposed to then, there's so many ways to learn. You know, if you're on your phone and you're trying to go through your Instagram to see who posted and how many likes you have, you could be taking a Coursera class. Right. You know, I was in the car driving up. It was an hour drive, and I'm reading about artificial intelligence, right? And it's just I tried to find every opportunity. I would go to bookstores and just sit there, and because I couldn't buy the books, I would read the books. I would read the magazines. You know, I think the best skill I got at Indiana University was learning how to learn, and that I just had it in me that if I kept on learning, I would find something that gave me an opportunity or gave me an edge. And that's the advice I'd give. I mean, when I talk to recent college graduates, it's like, you don't need the perfect job. You just spent 4 years, you know, paying for somebody to teach you. When you graduate, now you're going to get paid to learn. And so take that job, and whatever job you get, doesn't matter if you're a bartender, if you're working at McDonald's, just be great at it and just pay attention and learn, as opposed to, I can't wait to get the hell out of here. Because every job is a learning opportunity. And look, that doesn't make it easier when you have kids, when you're just in a bad situation, you've got health problems, whatever it may be. You know, I wish there was some, you know, magic wand, but I always just tried to focus on something positive. I remember I gained like 30 pounds, 25 pounds probably when I moved to Dallas, because we would go to bars every night that had free food if you bought one beer, you know? And I could tell you the difference between the fried mushrooms and the chicken wings at every bar in town, you know, because that's how we ate. But everybody's going to be different, but you just have to find a positive light for yourself that keeps you going.
You know, we all, you know, failure kind of defines us, and we maybe not necessarily remember the wins, but we certainly remember the failures. What's one that failure in your life that really changed the trajectory, or one that really sticks out to you that was a real game changer for you?
I got fired. Yeah, I mean, I worked at a software store, and I swept the floor, you know, wiped down the windows, opened the store at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, whatever it was. And this is when I was living with the 6 guys or 5 other guys. And I mean, I just couldn't wait to get out. And so I had this sale finally where I was going to make a $1,500 commission. And so I called my boss, Michael Humecki. And I said, look, I want to go close this deal, because the store needed sales. I mean, I learned so much by what he didn't do more than what he did do. And I'm like, okay. And he said, no, you got to be there. And I'm like, I've got it covered. He goes, no. And so I made the executive decision that if I went out there and picked up a $15,000 check and brought it back, that he would see the light. Fired me on the spot. I took the $15,000 check back, gave it back to the customer, and said, you know what? I'm a lousy employee. I obviously don't take direction very well from Michael Humecki. And started Micro Solutions. You know, still starving and not having much, but turned out okay.
You know, I'm honored, and you met my mom and dad and my family here, and I'm honored to have them here.
Where's LaMelo?
They're right there.
What up, LaMelo?
There he is. There he is. What's something that your mom and your dad taught you growing up that you still remember?
Oh. You know, my dad used to take me down to where he worked, and I'd make $5 sweeping the floor. My mom was worried that, you know, that I needed a trade, because she was afraid that you know, she didn't know what I was good at or what I could do, and that I needed a trade. And even though I was a hustler, I sold things, and I was a good salesperson. I sold magazines door to door, and I made money doing that. I was, you know, sold candy, whatever, I could sell it. She's like, no, you need a trade. And so she got me a job working for this realtor, and they taught me how to lay carpet. And because she was worried about me. And what I learned from that was that I suck at laying carpet. I am not a tradesman in any way, shape, or form, and that I better use my brain or I was in deep trouble. And so it motivated me more to get into business and teach myself about business. And at my high school wouldn't let me take a business class because it was only for seniors. And so I said, well, I want to be a business guy now. I'm all in because I suck at laying carpet. And it's like, I dropped out of high school and went to the University of Pittsburgh and took classes there for what would have been my senior year of high school, and then transferred them to Indiana. And so, just realizing what I wasn't helped motivated me to help become what I needed to be. So, thanks, Mom.
Yep, thanks, Mom. That's right. This speaker series is all about raising awareness and money for diversity and entrepreneurship scholarships for students right here at Judson. What does diversity mean to you, and what are some things that you're working on in your portfolio, increasing diversity?
Diversity to me means opportunity. I think when we look at diversity, too often we see a checklist. And look, I learned a lot of lessons with the Dallas Mavericks. We had some real issues that taught me a lot of painful lessons. And I think the greatest lesson I learned with the Mavs was people that look different than me have access to different markets than me and understand how to market to those markets. Like at the Mavs, we wanted to sell more to the very large Hispanic community in Dallas. I had a bunch of white guys doing it. We wanted to sell to moms. I had a bunch of white guys doing it. That's the definition of stupidity. And I wasn't there enough. I didn't see it. It wasn't obvious to me at the time. Now, for all the companies I invest in, for companies that I advise, for companies that I invest in, it's like, how are you using diversity to your advantage? Is there a market, is there a community out there that really could use your product that you just don't know how to sell to? That's where you have people that don't look like you, whether it's people of color, people with different gender, different sexual orientation. These are all real business opportunities, and you'll do a better job having somebody in your company that understands those markets, understands how to sell to them, understands what those consumers are thinking. And it's paid off in big dividends for me. And in terms of investing, if you go to markcuban.com, you can see most of my companies, not all. And I think about half, just under half, because we sold a couple, are women-owned or women-led business. And I've really picked up in investing in people of color because it's a lot of people look at supporting or investing in people of color, whatever it may be, disadvantaged groups, because they think it's just the right thing to do because, hey, they've been disadvantaged. I see it the exact opposite way. I think it's an incredible opportunity because there's so few people selling the right way into those markets that it's such an opportunity for any entrepreneur to say, all right, who's really selling into Hispanic or Indian or LGBTQ community or whatever it may be? Let's go find somebody who's good at it because it's under-marketed. And so to me, it's a great opportunity, and it costs less because you can start smaller and there's just a different type of work ethic. And that sounds bad in some respects, but when you go into markets where people haven't been given an opportunity, they're much more grateful for it. Mm-hmm. And when they're willing to start smaller, whereas you go to Silicon Valley, well, I'm not going to do anything unless we raise $37 million. And it's just a different work ethic, and to me, that's a great opportunity.
Talking about the Mavs, you hired Cynthia Marshall as the CEO last year, and she is just an inspiring and energetic person. What's it like working with her?
She's a beast. I thought I had energy. She makes me seem tired. I thought I was outgoing at times. I mean, I'm shy and introverted compared to her. And that's saying a lot. But her mission is to learn, to earn, and to do the right thing. And she leads by example. Where, I've been doing this. Look, one of the downsides of really accomplishing some of your goals is that you change your priorities. Like we talked earlier, my kids and my family are much more of a priority than they were when I was, disengaging with my girlfriends. And Cynthia is so hands-on, where if I showed up at the Mavs office, prior to Cynthia, once every year, 18 months, that was a lot. Cynthia is really hands-on, talk to everybody, get to know them personally, meet their families, really connect to them, and that's her management style. And that just makes her just incredibly effective, and it works really well. She's I always like to partner with people who have the skill sets that I don't have to complement me. She's got what I don't have, and then she's better at what I do have, and so it's really been really good.
Oh, it's fantastic. You talked about earlier about AI, and sorry about that hour-long drive. But you talked about the future of AI, and you've said, are we really close to like a Terminator-like figure with the advancements in AI, and sort of what does that look like, the future?
It'll be within a lot of our lifetimes, but I mean, we're talking 40, 50 years. I mean, if you think about the movie Terminator, and Arnold does come back, and you have like robots out there. The only thing holding us back, it's not the intelligence part of it, because we'll have the communications to be able to send data and instructions to their brain. We have computer vision so they can see. It's manual dexterity. You can't, robots can't grab things and don't have the dexterity to be able to react and do things. And then there's also power. You can't just plug in a robot, or a Terminator and just say, oh, where's my power cord, right? And the batteries, if you think about a Tesla, the batteries are so big and don't last very long. And so that still has to be solved, but it will over the next 50 years. And so, warfare in 50 years is going to look much different than it does today. And hopefully, we'll contain it, and it won't be the network or whatever it was called in Terminator, and it won't be blue pill, red pill, in the Matrix. But it's something, and let me say this, having been in technology a long time, I was here when PCs first happened. That was my job, selling software for PCs that I got fired from. And then we connected them into networks. I remember selling local area networks. That was my company, Micro Solutions. And people were like, I don't need to connect my PCs together. I'll carry my 5¼ inch floppy from this PC to that PC, with its 140K. And that was a big step. And then the internet came along, and I remember people saying, streaming, no one's going to do that. As we started broadcast.com, I'll just watch radio or TV, and but the internet's going to be big, and we'll see how big it gets. And then mobile came along, and then mobile networking, and now everything's in our pocket, and it's getting smaller on our watches. And I just saw an AR demonstration in contact lenses. I mean, just crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. AI blows all that away. As big as all that is, as much of an impact that the internet and mobile has had, AI just will impact us and change our world a billion times more. And it's because now, when you start, if you run a business, you kind of work from experience. And you think, I kind of know this market, or I have somebody who knows this market, and we model different things. Maybe we put it in a spreadsheet and we play what if. With AI, you can look at every possible alternative. And not only once you train the models within AI or the networks within AI, they can't think, but they can look at every possible combination. And they can come up with patterns and look for things that there's no way we could see out of billions of data points. And so that type of impact is going to change every business. And I say this all the time. If you run a business and you have long-term, goals for the business, you have to start to understand AI. Now, how do you do that? Like if you go in my bathroom, there's a book called Machine Learning for Dummies. You just got to start reading and learning. And think back, if you're old enough, like me, and you remember PCs, people were terrified of PCs. I don't use a PC. Then the internet came along. I don't want to get this internet thing. But now every kid does. No matter how anti-technology or not comfortable with technology you are, you get the internet because it's right on your phone, right? And AI is going to be the same way. At some point, it'll be common enough, and there'll be tools and skill sets enough where it'll be easier. But if you want to get ahead of it, now's the time to start learning it. And it's easy just to go on Coursera, Introduction to AI, or go on YouTube, Introduction to AI, Introduction to Machine Learning, Introduction to Neural Networks. And it's less geeky than you might think, but it's worth just getting a basic understanding of.
And even Vladimir Putin said the country that wins the AI race will dominate the world.
I heard that's what he said in Helsinki, in that meeting, and I'm just messing again. But yeah. Slowly it goes through, yeah. But yeah, Putin said it. China had their 2035 plan, I think they called it, because it'll have that much of an impact on our lives, on our communications, and which company is the dominant economic force. And unfortunately, right now, we're, in this country, we're way behind. And the biggest AI research is coming from some universities, but also from the biggest technology companies. So this should be our moonshot, just like going to the moon. This is really something that the country needs to invest in, and we just haven't yet.
I saw recently that you did a mini Shark Tank version with the Air Force.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was pretty cool. I did it with NASA too. That was strange, but but I always try to help the military where I can. I was at InQtel this week in Palm Springs, talking to them about entrepreneurship, because the people that are serving, and if there's anybody here that served, thank you for your service, and thank you, Mark. But anybody in the military will tell you that FUBU is or FUBAR rather. I'm thinking Damon John. FUBAR is common, right? And so when I went to the Air Force and NASA wanted to really amplify their entrepreneurship, right? Where people who are really on the lines and doing the work come up with ideas and they implement them. And so I sat down there and they pitched me, and I kind of took I had to knock some of the Air Force out of them, and I had to be explained in the NASA stuff what the hell that stuff was, but I was there to encourage them that even though you may not think you're an entrepreneur because you have a job, you can be an entrepreneur. Right. Like earlier when I said, whatever job you're doing, try to be great at it because that's how you learn. And that's really, I just tried to encourage them that when you see something that you can improve on, now they have a program in the Air Force in particular for you to suggest it and move forward with it. And I was just trying to pump up the folks that had taken those steps forward.
Many use Uber and Lyft to travel around, and you said recently that Uber's IPO should be a wake-up call for Silicon Valley.
Yep. Basically, what I was saying is, traditionally with IPOs, they've been geared for fast-growing companies, and companies who may not be profitable but were close and just needed some capital. And in going public as a quickly growing company, not only do you get capital, not only do you give investors a chance to grow with you, but you also give some liquidity to your employees. And to me, giving that liquidity to employees, being a little bit early so investors can grow with you is smart. Now what Uber and Lyft had done, they're not startups anymore. They're 8, 9, 10-year-old companies. And their growth is kind of, they're hyper growth. They're still growing, but their hyper growth is kind of behind them. Mm-hmm. And so investors are looking at them not so much as these major growth companies that just have this hockey stick growth, but as hopefully steady growers that will eventually become profitable. But that's not nearly as attractive to investors. And Uber and Lyft tried to price as if they were going to be super exciting, but they aren't. And to me, that sent a message to investors in Silicon Valley, in particular VC firms, that you don't know how to evaluate late-stage companies. They like to put in money late when they think it's more deterministic of what's going to happen next, and it just shows they weren't very good at it. But it also brings up something else that to me is very important. We have an issue with income inequality in this country, where we're not helping people from the bottom raise up enough, right? And really, when you're getting paid by the hour, you're always going to be in a grind, always, because you're worried about where your next check is coming from, if your next check is enough, what happens if you're fired, what happens if somebody gets sick, you don't have much money in the bank to cover expenses if something goes wrong. And that's never going to change if you're making money by the hour. Now, where that can change, look, if you go down the Forbes 400 and you look to see how did wealthy people get wealthy, either someone gave it to you, gave you that $1 million loan, and then gave you an inheritance that you can turn to dust, but I'm digressing. But if you go down the list, it's equity appreciation. Somebody owns stock in a company. And in my companies that the one I took public and others that I've sold, I've always given equity to employees. Even when I sold Micro Solutions and I had 80 employees, they all got part of the money that I earned because that was the right thing to do. And when we talk about Silicon Valley and IPOs, they do give stock to employees, which is great. But those employees aren't there for 10 years, and so they lose a lot of opportunities. Some could sell in the private market, but that's really not there. But the bigger point is that we've got to change the ethos of Silicon Valley and investors everywhere and entrepreneurs everywhere that we should be giving stock to all of our employees, because that is the only way. Look, as an entrepreneur, you can't do this without your employees. And anybody who has their own company, and when you work for a company and you're getting paid by an hour, they can't do that without somebody in your position. It may not have to be you, but somebody will be in that position. And if we want to change this country, if we want to get the conversation away from socialism or what people perceive to be socialism, and we want to have it so people really experience the upside, then the only way that people are going to move from the bottom up is by sharing in the things that appreciate. And the thing that appreciates more than anything and is the easiest to create is shares of stock. Share of stock, you don't need a metal foundry, you don't need a fab plant, you don't have to negotiate anything, you don't even have to sign a piece of paper anymore. Bam, a board of directors says we're creating some stock, or we're issuing stock options to our employees, it's done. There's no incremental cost. Now, if you're at the top, you might get diluted a little bit. You might not have as much upside. But what you're doing to change who we are. So we'll go back to platforms. Now we're seeing companies with multiple classes of stock. Like, who's just coming out? Lyft has done it. Uber changed it. And then somebody else has some crazy multiple classes of stock. Facebook has got it. I would tax, if everybody's not in doesn't share the same class of stock is ownership, I would tax any gains from the board, whatever the CEO, whatever they own, their class of stock, the preferred class of stock, I would tax that as regular income no matter what. And only do you get capital gains approach if everybody shares in the same class of stock. Because that's the only way we're going to change things. That's the only way we're going to close the divide. I'm not a believer in trickle-down economics, and I'm not a believer in trickle-down taxation. And that's what we're seeing from a lot of candidates right now. Look, I don't mind paying more taxes. After military service, I think it's the most patriotic thing you can do. Look, I've written 9-figure tax checks. You heard my voice crack. And it's crazy, right? But realize that he doesn't get to go to Afghanistan. We don't feel safe. All the people that serve don't get paid unless somebody writes those checks. And so I don't mind paying more taxes. I mind how it's being spent, but just as importantly, we're not going to be able to just tax more and have trickle-down taxation. That's not going to lift people up. They're still going to be getting paid by the hour. Anybody in here who's an entrepreneur, works with an entrepreneur, invests in entrepreneurs, you need to strongly encourage that everybody that works in those companies gets equity, because that's the only way the game changes. That's the only way people get lifted up.
Since we're here on a college campus and you have young children, what do you think is really the biggest threat facing this generation?
I don't think it's too much screen time. I know that's what everybody likes to say.
Right.
I remember, our parents yelling at us for being on the phone too much and sitting in front of the TV too much, watching Gilligan's Island all day or the Brady Bunch or whatever, Hogan's Heroes. That was probably more corrosive than playing Fortnite. Seriously. Think about it. My generation walked around going, I hear nothing, I see nothing, I know nothing. Right? And so when my 9-year-old's playing Fortnite and he's, go for it. I don't know. I don't know that this generation faces threats any greater or less than any other generation. Look, we don't live in the world we were born into. You know, if you think about the state of technology the year you were born, it's crazy what's changed. You know, my oldest daughter was born in 2003. There were no iPhones. You know, it's just everything changed. People didn't talk about AI, you know, in phones. Just everything changes all the time, and that's never going to stop. And that will create its own set of challenges. But I think the greatest threat is that, you know, I'd say the greatest threat to just the country is just what I was talking about earlier, is income inequality. Because, I mean, I remember reading this book, and this has been with me forever, in high school. It was called Why Men Rebel. And I'll never forget it. I even bought a copy. And basically what it said, when your expectations go and or continue to grow, but your reality diverges from it, that's when people start to fight. You know, and when having social unrest, having, you know, like having cities burn or towns burn like you saw in Ferguson, that's the greatest threat. When people walk in and shoot things up, or shoot churches, or shoot schools up, you know, just because they don't think their life is worth anything, or for whatever reason, what they read, you know, to me, that's a great threat. And again, you in my mind, education, obviously, but also helping people from the bottom up. Because if people don't feel good about their lives, that's when they start to take dramatic action that impacts people they don't know. Whereas if you feel, you know, you have a chance and you have a shot of getting where you want to go, even if it's not all the way, but getting somewhere, then you're less likely to do those things that could harm our kids.
We've got a couple of questions that were written down from those that were in the sponsors. And one is from Kaylin Price, WR Meadows, and she says, on Shark Tank, is there a project that you regret not taking?
You know, I get asked that question all the time. What's the one that got away? So let me give you some background. I just want to hear one. Anybody watch Shark Tank? Sunday nights on ABC. All day long on CNBC. So here's what happens. So I think June 12th we start shooting season 11. And on shoot days, we're on stage and cameras start rolling at 9 a.m., which means I roll in about 8:30, go to my trailer, throw on a suit, they put some makeup on me, comb my hair, put this crap in my hair so the balding doesn't show, right? The thinning doesn't show, which makes my top of my head look black, and I hate. But you know, it takes me about 30 minutes to get ready. Mr. Wonderful comes in about 4 hours early because there's so much scalp room for them to cover. And then we start shooting deals, and we know nothing about them. When they walk in, they'll say, this is, you know, Mark and Mark, and then they start pitching. And those pitches could go on anywhere from 20 minutes if it's really stupid to 60, 90 minutes. We've had one go 2 hours plus, and then they edit those down to the 10 to 14 minutes. And so we'll do, depending on how long the deals are, anywhere from 10 to 12 a day. And we're shooting, you know, all in maybe 4 weeks, and we'll see 250 deals per season. And so when it comes, like the minute I'm out, you'll see my eyes just glaze over, you know. And the hardest part about Shark Tank is not deciding which deals to do, it's how do you go out without sounding like an idiot? I mean, just think about what Lori and Kevin and Robert say every time they go out. They say the same thing. Lori, you know, I think this could be as a hero. I don't think it's a zero, but I really want to tell you that you just don't need me. You're going to do such wonderful things. My heart goes out to you. I can tell you're just a beautiful person, but I'm out. And Kevin's like, I'm going to take it out behind the barn and shoot it. Bam. And Robert's like, it's a really cool idea, but there's no puppies involved, so I'm out. I know I'm going to get killed for that, but that's okay.
Well, we've got about 2 more minutes, and then Dr. Kroom's going to come up and just wrap this up, and we have something special for you. But the last question is from Rich Diaz from advanced resources. And he said, in your opinion and based on your experiences, what are the biggest innovations and changes we will see in healthcare and technology in our lifetime?
AI. I mean, so right now, when you think about medicine, our bodies are just one big math equation, right? We know a little bit. We know what our heart rates are. We know, you can get a blood test and know, what your glucose levels are. You can take your blood pressure. There's certain data that we have, and every day science discovers more and more data. And over time, we'll continue to get more and more of that data, which will allow us to use artificial intelligence. Because remember, I said, when we do things now, we kind of have to guess, and we're limited in the number of variables. But when you look at your body with personalized medicine, that number of variables is just going to grow and grow, and AI will be able to tell us more secrets about ourselves, whether it's immunotherapy for cancer, whatever it may be. And it'll get to the point, like my son's 9 years old. By the time he's 50, the idea of walking into a pharmacy and buying an over-the-counter medication won't exist anymore. If you think about it, you go to a pharmacy today and you go buy, pick one, Benadryl, whatever, it's always the same. And on the back there's a warning. They always have warnings. And they make it long and confusing, but effectively they're saying you might be the one unlucky schmuck that dies from this. Right? Or your face is going to blow up and you're going to look like a space monster. And so in the future, and I think one of the greatest developments, we'll know so much more about our body. We'll be able to personalize the medicine so that when you go, it may just be transported to you and inserted into you, but it'll be medicine that's specifically for you, so that when my son is anywhere near my age, it won't be medicine per se. It'll just be the response and hopefully the cure, or hopefully they'll know what's wrong in advance, and there'll be sensors everywhere. Jake, you're getting a cold, and we know you're getting a cold because in listening to your voice, it's a little bit off by 1/zillionth of a fraction in sound, and so we know with you that's an indication that your throat's going to be sore in 17 minutes, so drink this. That's what's going to happen. I mean, I have a company I invested in, Genesthesis from Cincinnati. I had no idea that each of our organs in our body emits an electrical pulse. And there are now sensors that can capture that electrical pulse. And they went to the Mayo Clinic and said, we want to take that captured pulse and save them into a sound file and run them through machine learning and compare the results that we get, or compare those files to the health status of the 10,000 people that we're analyzing. And for the output from their heart, the electrical pulse from their heart. And starting with that data set, now they're able, with 97% accuracy, to know if that individual has one of 5 different cardiac problems. Now, why is that important? Well, guys in the audience that are 40 or older, or remember Sanford and Son, now they're doing TV trivia. I'm coming, here's the big one, right? Because we all feel these pains, these chest pains, and we don't know what they are, and we don't know if we should be terrified, or we don't know if it's nothing. And so we go to the doctor, or we go to the hospital, or we go to the emergency room. And what do they do there? They take your blood pressure, they take your heart rate, they do an EKG to see how it's going. Maybe they put you through a stress test. But to figure out what that really is, or if it's nothing, it's, you ate something. Less pizza next time. The only way to know now is to give all these different tests, 5, 6 different tests. But with what Genesthesis is doing we'll just put you under this machine that tracks the pulse, the emitted pulse from your heart, and with 97% accuracy, we'll tell you within 30 minutes. Now all of a sudden, the emergency rooms are less crowded. People are more certain that I don't really have a heart ailment, and I can confidently eat more pizza. It's changing. It's changing. This old the Chicago Saturday, with the Saturday Night Live thing where they're all sitting around, from Chicago, eating deep dish and drinking beer and
hot dogs, yeah.
And
The Bears, yeah.
Boom. So medicine's just going to change.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Mark Cuban.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
So,
Good job.
Mark, we actually have two gifts to present to you. I understand that Mark Vargas has a bit of a musical gift that you wanted to play for him or to cue something up for.
We'll cue it up when Mark walks out.
Okay,
We'll
so that'll be the cue to do that.
Should I be
think you will
afraid?
No,
will
it's yours. Mark
appreciate
Cuban's
that. Mark, you mentioned in your comments about time and the importance of time. It's the one commodity, the one gift that we all have. Elgin, as a community for a long time, was the home of the Elgin Watch Company.
That's right.
And the Elgin Watch Company for over 100 years made amazing pieces of art and timepieces that people cherished, but were also very accessible, and people took great pride in their workmanship. And so we want to present to you a classic 1905 pocket watch from the Elgin Watch Company, thanks to our friends at Shockey Jewelers for helping us continue to find such amazing pieces of art. They're going to put the pocket watch up there for you. As our way, is our way of saying thank you for dedicating your time to come share with us.
My pleasure.
We appreciate it, Judson, and we appreciate it at Elgin very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please give another round of applause for Mark Cuban.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi folks, thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.